Hey folks, welcome back to Crypto Heartbeat. This is Matt, and today I'm super excited to be with longtime friend Michael Norman, the CEO of LivFul. Michael, welcome to the Crypto Heartbeat family.
Great. Thanks, Matt. It's awesome to be here.
Well, I'm really excited. You know, Michael and I, for those of you who do not know, which you don't, Michael and I have known each other for the last 17 plus years. I've been a part of a journey with him that is amazing. And I've looked so forward to this because, you know, a little bit earlier, about 5 or 6 days ago, I did an interview with the founder of LivFul. And Michael is the CEO. And if you've watched that video, this video is going to be such a great compliment to that. And I want you to not only learn and see who Michael is, but also the vision that LivFul has about how to change the world. Because in the Compassion Cartel and all the work that we're doing is really about what are the systems and processes and strategies that really actually are going to make an impact. And those are the things that LivFul's been working on for years. And I just want people to be aware of it. And Michael, welcome to this time, and just so excited for you to share your passions, your journey, and the strategic direction of LivFul and your team.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. It's awesome to be here. And, I'm relatively new to crypto, but thanks to you, I was able to get in on the Pulse sacrifice phase and really start to understand the dynamics of the PulseChain and what's happening. And it was a really sweet strategic point of coming together where within LivFul, we had some ideas about what could really impact people's lives, and seeing, kind of emerging tools in blockchain and crypto being critical to that. And yet not exactly knowing what to do. And so to be learning about this community that you're involved with and what's happening is really not just cool and fun, but like strategic for our business. And so it's great to be here. It's really awesome and exciting to share and kind of play a part in our journey, and then your community and this great group, and joining that up is awesome.
Yeah, it's by far the best community in crypto, in my opinion. People are just watching out for each other, super supportive. And then a lot of people who are really following the lead of Richard Hart in this effort to say, it's one thing to have resources. It's another thing to be stewards of those in a way that makes a difference in the world and communities and people's lives. And I know that is like exactly aligned with what you guys are doing. I would love for you to start with sharing your background, just sharing, your story and history, because there's some pretty amazing things that you've been a part of prior to LivFul that I think is a good way to set things up.
Yeah, I'd love to share. And, you can say, really, it's a journey. We all have a journey. And I think so many things in the world can beat us down or take away our joy, or just bring us difficulty. And that's the journey. And so kind of my journey is a strange one from where I started to being CEO of this purpose-driven kind of early stage company. I started as a lawyer, of all things, about 21 years ago. And most people don't think of lawyers to kind of impact investing and business and all of these things, and of course the lawyer jokes and the disdain that's often rightfully characterizing lawyers, but I started as a corporate lawyer right after the .com crash was when I started. So it was just kind of a shell shocked days where, everything that people thought was going to happen didn't happen the way they expected. And there's a real sense of like, how do you regroup from that and start building new things out of the ashes of that? And so it was a great time to be a young lawyer, kind of learning. And I had great mentors who showed me what it was to be honorable and trustworthy in the legal profession, notwithstanding all of that, the junk that just by saying you're a lawyer, you sort of trigger. But early on, I had a real sense that while I loved what I was doing and learning, I didn't love the kind of actual practice of law. I had a real entrepreneurial yearning in my spirit. And, but, I just finished law school. I was just married. My wife was kind of starting to build a company she was engaged in, and it wasn't like I could come home and go, "Hey, I'm going to quit and do something else." So I stuck with it, and I learned over time, where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be, and so around 2008, I finally kind of had the capacity with family, with my wife and our young family, and real clarity of calling that had grown over the past few years around my faith and business, and this integration of who did I want to be as a person and what was the calling around my life. And there's a lot of movement in the past 20 years around this kind of thinking around how do you make a difference with business? How do you not just look at business as extractive or, finance, especially as like, yep, the purpose here is to just make as much money as possible and, damn the consequences. Whatever happens, not my issue, and I think in the last 20 years, the world has awakened to, what, that's actually not how we should function as a culture. And, really you look at kind of what we're living through today and it's just further fragmenting. So as you and I have talked about Bitcoin and then, Pulse and Hex and the blockchain enablement of things that, this is rooted in a lot of bad systems that are quite abusive. But I didn't know that 14 years ago, and we didn't know all of this, right? I just had this yearning in my heart to say, who should I be and what should I do? And so I did finally, in a way, kind of gather the courage, convince my wife to take this leap out of kind of the job world and whatever, and jump into this idea of impact and using business as a force for good. And very naive, very kind of just expectant, of what could be, but really having no idea what we were doing. And also, if you remember, 2008 was another crash time. And so we found ourselves, I had a partner at the time who agreed to join me, and we started out on a journey and immediately got our legs just cut right out from under us because everything we were thinking would happen, got rolled over in the 2008 financial crisis. And so kind of right out of the gates, we were faced with a question of, do we really believe there's a journey here for us to take, or should we go back to the more traditional? And January of 2009, we literally said, okay, there's a calling here. There's a journey to take, and believed in that and started forward. And I can say just insane stuff started happening, from where we were trying to push our way into some things, people started pulling us forward. And I live in a community with a big medical presence. And at the time, there was a medical school, Texas A&M Medical School was in the area. And there's a real sense of and a passion for research and, creation of innovation and that kind of thing. And so marrying up this sense of calling and purpose and the kind of the opportunities at my fingertips with Texas A&M, we ended up pursuing some technology that A&M and Stanford University had to try to create a diagnostic test for tuberculosis. And I thought, very naively at the time, man, what could be better, for the world than a simple test for TB, having really a limited sense of even at the time how bad tuberculosis was in the world. And so we really started literally from ground zero with an idea and access to this technology, and started on a journey that meant, kind of going through the process of building a company, process of taking out intellectual property, process of, creating investor relationships. And what I learned in that around sort of the global health aspects of what we were doing was it was way more complicated than I imagined, and required really an approach of building relationships with people, because there's so many systems in place that people are gatekeepers. They're the funders. They have their ideas about what's right and wrong in the space. And just because I was exuberant did not mean it mattered at all. So we started a journey, and we started figuring out, how do you do that? And that's where the crazy stuff started happening, because we had no background. I had literally no background in this whatsoever. I was a lawyer, doing deals for years. And what we found was, it really wasn't about our particular expertise, but it was our attitude and our posture, that we came to the table with this interesting technology and humility, where it's like, we know we don't know the answers. You're the smart people in the room. Help us know what to do with this. And that literally took us on a journey around the world. I traveled way too much in 2013, 14, as we were building this and bringing these kind of people together, and had a really good run where we were able to bring some of the earliest social impact type funds that were really being built at the time, as well as bring some really large groups like Wellcome Trust in the UK, and various Gates Foundation backed groups who really cared about this issue. And this is all way before the pandemic, and now Gates and all of this stuff. Whatever you think about all of that, it's a household name now. We understand the impact of these types of groups, the WHO, on people's daily lives, as we lived through the pandemic. But this was pre all of that, and I was learning it really on the fly, and just because of our posture and our real desire to serve and love people through our business, it was kind of like, okay, you're different, and I've gotten to work with a lot of people around the world now, and Americans don't necessarily have the greatest reputation around the world, because we think we know everything. We think we, literally rule the world and impose our will. All these things, you're carrying that baggage as an American when you go abroad. And so to go with humility and to go with a sense of, how do we together build something and change something and serve people? It's like this breath of fresh air and this breath of connection point. And we really saw that. And so when I watch your videos and I see the comments, and it's people from all over the world, and it's things happening, I see that same dynamic. It's like, this is this uniting idea of recognizing there's a lot of broken in the world, and it's not about being a nationality, or people groups. Like, we're people. We're called to be change agents when these systems are oppressing people, and these systems are wrong, and so that's my DNA. Really. That company unfortunately failed in 16, because the technology, we got all the way to clinical trials with our prototype test, and did a trial in South Africa at Cape Town, which you just heard about with the Omicron,
variant.
Really fantastic scientists down there. And it unfortunately didn't perform how we hoped. And my investors all said, great, you did a great job. You proved it didn't do what we thought it might. But you didn't fail because you lied to us. You didn't fail because you stole money. You didn't fail because you're a bad, manager or steward. the technology just didn't do what we hoped. And but CEO and leader of that company, and invested years. It was really hard, really painful. Of course, we had employees, and so that was terrible. And yet, everything we learned and everything we went through prepared us to then have common. It was some investors and colleagues in that company who knew what LivFul was doing and saw a common ethos, common trajectory. And so that is how I ended up getting connected to LivFul. And so I'm, now several years into leading LivFul and just being thankful for the journey and the lessons learned. Broken noses and broken bones and all.
Well, and I've watched this journey because we've known each other for the last 17 plus years, and I've seen that process. One of the things I want viewers to know, and Michael's extremely humble. He's not one that's going to be self-promotive, and I think that it's important because I saw it firsthand. Is the fact that this work you did with the diagnostic, and I want you to share kind of the reasons here. One of the core things I understood about that diagnostic was you wanted to lower the cost because you knew that the current systems were set up for the wealthiest, right? And I think this is something that really I see in LivFul as well, and I think is a really great bridge to the LivFul story, is the fact that you went out into this world really at the beginning of what I would consider to be serious investments in impact, and that people wanted to have this social investments. And you were one of the first companies with a major fund. I'd love for you to share about that, but also to talk about the challenges of having a heart for people and knowing that, tuberculosis is an enormous problem, but costs and I think traditional ways of doing business, which to me mirrors what's happening in the traditional financial world versus blockchain. Right. The blockchain is changing and disrupting the traditional systems. And kind of there's an element of that of what you're trying to do to say, hey, let's do what's right for people. And so can you talk about that as far as investments and the costs and why and what people groups, that stuff?
Yeah, I think, when you look at life sciences, using kind of the broadest brush of health innovation, you talking about pharmaceutical industry, diagnostics industry, all the work that's being done, you see it, related to COVID and genetic sequencing and all of that stuff. Almost all of the research and all of the market driving behaviors are towards the richest top 10% of the world, which primarily exists in the United States, in Europe, Japan. And then, of course, every country has a sliver of wealth that may be bigger or smaller depending on the country. And so what you end up with then is a system that is completely driven to create products for that top of the pyramid, as we call it within LivFul. And so when you talk about funding for those endeavors, and you talk about the organizational inertia of everything, serving people below that top 10% is just literally not on the table. And it's just in traditional finance, venture capital, strategic partnering with big companies, it's just not on the table. And when you look at so many of the big pharma companies are publicly traded, they're literally beholden to that kind of quarterly performance cadence that is reviewed by analysts every 3 months, and your margins and your deployment of capital is scrutinized. So you can't create something you're not going to make as much money on. You literally can't, because the market will punish you for that. So how then do things get to the poor people of the world, the more resource limited places around the world. It's really about off-patent, old things that can finally come to a price point that is low enough to work. So our expectation when we started the previous company and now in LivFul was, how do you turn that on its head? And how do you say, no, actually, if I design something for a more resource constrained environment, then I actually create a better product. It's more robust. It works better for the wealthy person. And I've created a cost structure that means I make more money if I can sell it to a wealthy person. My margins are bigger. But this is like not right, not normal, not normal thinking. So over the last 10 years, more and more investors have seen this proposition, and because of their faith position or their moral, recognition that the systems are just broken and don't serve 90% of 8 billion people in the world, and just recognizing that's wrong. So more and more people have started to recognize this, but still capital amounts are just dwarfed by what is done institutionally. And so we got to play a part in, kind of early in that cycle in 2010, 11, 12, where we weren't talking about big money, in the scheme of things, but we were talking about real money, not 10 grand, but, moving into millions of dollars deployed into this kind of purpose-driven business concept and driving towards serving the mass amount of, group of people with the same needs and problems that the wealthy have, and having to turn the business model on its head. Yeah. And what's cool is 10 or 12 years later, it's not insignificant. This movement is gaining traction, and the dollars are now in the B's, not M's. So there are billions of dollars starting to be deployed. And that's where the beauty of the blockchain starts to come in, because at the core issue in all of this is accountability and trust. And we don't actually trust each other, right? And in fact, business, kind of traditional business is like, I've got to screw you before you screw me, right? It's all about me and taking mine. And so when you talk about going into markets that are less transparent and more difficult to reach and with a little less structure, then that trust issue is paramount. And so there's some really cool things happening that are utilizing the blockchain to start to create decentralized accountability, so that you take away that corruption point, right? Or that sort of gate point that's closed. Yeah. That's hard to get through, because there's a person sitting there who sees this as an opportunity to toll, and when you think about the global sort of commercial world, it's really about who gets control of the keys to things, and they win, and everybody else pays the tax on that. So we started from the beginning saying, how do you flip that on its head? And how do you find people that agree that's not right, and carry that forward?
Well, what's interesting about that, excuse me, is the more and more I get to know this community. And of course, this is such an interesting time because of this abundance that we see coming. And, we've seen it with people in Hex. We're seeing that in Pulse and just the blockchain in general, the kind of gains. And so regular people are finding themselves in this abundant situation. And with the Compassion Cartel work that we've been doing and just trying to understand people's passions, what I find is that, here you are, somebody 10 years ago plus, being an advocate for people who, don't have the resources, and saying, how can we change the model so that we can have profitability, because it has to be sustainable, and marrying that with actual innovative technologies that can be extremely helpful to that group. I think what's what's fascinating about it is it's so refreshing. And what I've seen you talk about over the years is that there's this next generation, right? That there's almost a generational kind of coloring to each of these kind of eras, and that younger people are becoming in control of dollars, and they're really more open to having this conversation about how do we do well, how do we do what's right, how do we do both. And do you see that? I mean, you've mentioned that, but do you see that happening as far as this shift is bigger than we imagine?
I think, the opportunity for real change is coming. I think you look back at generations and you see, of course, the 60s generation, our parents to grandparents, there's radical change, right? So young people always shake things up. What's happening now is, at least kind of in the United States and in Europe, you've got enormous wealth transferring at the same time as you've got these idealists who are coming into influential place as young people. And so I totally see that. And it's a natural flow for that person to want to be a part of something and use the resources they now have access to, and their influence and their fullness of being, where you might have thought, the World War II generation moving into the 60s, it's like, no, I just work, my job is to work, and I'm going to go work hard, and leave my work at home. And then I'm at home. And I think young people especially, are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm my full self 24/7. And my full self says, this is wrong, what I'm observing around me. And I need to be a part of changing that. And we see that at LivFul. Like when we're, I would say 100% successful in attracting like-minded people that are like, I want to be here because I want to be a part of this calling. And that's from, just lower level, younger employees we're hiring, all the way to really attracting top capacity talent that's older, and much more experienced. And it's like, I want to be a part of something that's meaningful and has purpose. And it's not just about my salary or my pay or whatever. It's like, how do I express my fullness of self into my work, and that have extension beyond just, the sale of a product, but rather the partnership to do good things in the world.
It's interesting. It reminds me, I think you're familiar with the book by Bob Buford called Halftime, and then he did one called Success to Significance. And one of the things, he was a disciple, if you will, of Peter Drucker. And one of the things that Bob Buford would talk about is there are these people, and I know these folks are on your team, right? People have been tremendously successful in the legacy model of extraction, right? And they've done it all, right? These top players on your team, and just that he speaks to in this book, have extracted all this value, have won the game, right? Their report card has an A on it. Their bank account is reflective of winning, but they feel empty. And that there's this idea that what does a truly integrated full life look like, and what's the significance and purpose and legacy? And it sounds like, the wind is kind of at your back with LivFul in some respects, that this generationally, here we are, Gen Xers, right? 1 foot in the analog world, 1 foot in the digital world. We're seeing that the world is full of people that, wow, they're kind of like us, right? And there's humanity in it. And we recognize that. And we say, maybe we shouldn't destroy people to make money. And that's obviously becoming more and more popular. But that's reflected in your team. I feel like you have attracted some of the people that are literally the top of every part of the profession. Can you speak to that team and how crazy it is? Because I think it's amazing, the group that you got.
Yeah, I think it shows just how powerful this dynamic we're talking about of just wanting to be a part of right things, and rightness. And the we've experienced that, and it's been amazing. Our senior team is extraordinarily experienced at the highest levels of, and not me. I'm not talking about myself here. I'm talking about the team we've attracted, and their accomplishments. So running global M&A for Fortune 15 company, and doing multi-billion-dollar transactions, and guys who have led pharmaceutical programs at very large pharma, in their past. And why would they be here? And it's what you're describing. It's this idea of calling and purpose, and being able to not leave that at the door. And when you talk back to this concept of brokenness and motivations and incentives in the life science industry, it's just so difficult. And what I found getting to work with a lot of great scientists and a lot of great people in the health industry, the people are great. It's like you get into that because you want to help people,
right?
But you put the engine of finance and the engine of the publicly traded corporation on top of all that, and the money, the massive money and influence, and all of that at the top. And it can be a real grind on your spirit, because you're not getting to be the person you want to be, and the reason you got into that industry in the first place, right? And we know, not even just at the pharmaceutical world, we all have friends who are doctors, and it's like, I love helping patients. I hate this thing that's put on top of me, to create the business of medicine. And
well, we're seeing that illustrated right now too. I think that everyone probably relates to the fact that if you look at the distribution of vaccines in the world, and you look at who's getting them and who's not getting them, and you look at where the money is flowing, and you look at the percentage of people within, communities. So I would say you use the term lower middle income countries. If you were to take those countries and you were to look at percentage of people being vaccinated, it's not because of vaccine reluctance, it's because of access. And you can tell, and it's just obviously the system is skewed towards, this is about money. And I think everyone senses that. And to me, having an advocate like the people in their team that you've put together and the structure of LivFul, I'm really interested in, you're building a platform that potentially is the antidote to this poison. And that to me is exciting. I want to dive into that to understand, what does this look like, and how can this truly be disruptive in a way that is redemptive, right? Because it's broken.
Yeah, I think we at LivFul, we've said we're going to develop products, and we're going to bring products to the market that are first and foremost focused on understood needs in low and middle income countries. And so it's not top down of, we have a product, and how do we sell it to you? It's got to be collaborative, where you're understanding context and creating and connecting with contextual needs, because you can't just take an expensive American heart intervention, and taking the electricity and the cost structure and all that, and just take it and put it into, say Ghana. Like, it doesn't work well. There's complexity to that. So our approach is, no, you have to understand the context in Ghana, which means you have to have a relationship with people in that context. And it's a relationship of dignity, because it says, no, I actually need you to tell me what you need. And then how do we work together to meet that need? But as a strategic trajectory, we know, if I can build something in a way that meets your need in a context where power is difficult, or price is paramount to be as low as possible, and the distribution system is challenging. So you can't just have, you don't necessarily have cold chain or, all of that. It's like, if I can solve that, I know I have a fantastic product for other markets in the world. And that's 7 billion people, of many of which, because of the advances of the past 50 years, are an emerging middle class within that, who have their own capacity to purchase. And you realize there's just billions of people with dignity of persons just like you. And you're trying to build the bridge to that. And it takes this upside down thinking. And it's not just about charity,
right?
But about collaboration and working together.
Well, what's funny is I've been in the nonprofit world for the last 20 years. And, it strikes me when I hear this from your perspective. You're doing the hard work, in my opinion. Charity is easy, but it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. We can throw money at something and kind of say, okay, there, that's much better. It's kind of putting salve on something, but it's not a fix. And if money could fix it, it would have already fixed it. And I feel like what you're saying is somebody has to step up who's going to advocate for contextual solutions, who's going to be humble enough to actually listen and not think that, well, because we're the smartest or most powerful. And I think what's really fascinating is for people to understand how unusual it is what you're doing, and that these systems and platforms and ecosystems have to be created if we're truly going to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think, it sounds great, but why is it not like this? There are real structural problems, right? That do take resources to overcome. But I think the difference between today and, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, is that you actually have generations of leadership now who have been trained in the same institutions that people in the West are trained in. And they're now going, what? I need help with resources, and I need help with kind of execution, but I know what to do.
Yeah.
This it's not the sense of, I don't know what to do and you need to tell me what to do. And I think if you look at the last 30 years of charity, big organizations have grown up like World Vision or Compassion or, whatever. Well, they were a bridge, right? They were a recognition that there's a lot of basic capacity building, and that bridging that trust issue was like a physical thing. Like Compassion goes and does things with people,
right?
Enables things to happen. But I just think 30 years on, the understanding of what needs to be done is in country. It's not needed to be top down. And so the next phase in my mind of this evolution is like creating systems that enable leadership and enable the entrepreneurs and enable the people who know what should happen in their context to do that. So it's an enabling function. The problem is that no systems that it just is not our nature to sort of give away what we control, right? Yep. So I support some great charities, but they're part of the problem, ultimately, right? And the governments of the world are certainly part of the problem, right? Yep. And so the systems that are going to free people are not going to be incremental change from what exists, in my opinion. It's going to be paradigm changing things. And so at LivFul, we feel like that's part of our call, kind of to be a bridge, to be a system builder. And like I said, most people are not in the life science pharma world. They're not evil, right? It's the incentives that can distort things. But the people themselves that I spend a lot of time with are attracted to this story because they're like, yes, I want to I want to be a part of that story. That's why I started doing this in the first place. Like, how do we work together?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's, what's interesting to me is it's extremely refreshing, but also I think that it hasn't been tackled until now because it's hard. And the fact that you and your team have been called out to that, and it not that it's easy, but that it's right. And that's what calling really is, right? Purpose, it connects a sense of peace, but it also provides you the propulsion you need to move forward. And I sense that there's just so many people longing for connecting to things that, one, can potentially be legacy building for them, two, provide them with purpose, and three, make them feel like they're actually making the best and most strategic impact they can. Because, you can kind of satisfy your need to help in many ways, kind of locally. And but I think there's a lot of people out there that see the power of the blockchain, and they see this big shift, right? And that, this isn't just a, like you said, incremental thing. The blockchain is truly something that, in my opinion, is kind of a miracle, because if you think about the idea, what you just said, right? Giving away the power. In this, if you look back at the original paper by Satoshi, who in their right mind would take this new form of money and say, oh, I don't want control of it. It's only going to thrive because we all agree and no one has control. And I think what was really fascinating is I did a video, a series on game theory, and really pointed out John Nash's equilibrium, which he won the Nobel Prize for, because it basically said, if I'm concerned about what's good for you, and this idea that the principle of, consider others more important than yourselves, or at least as important as yourselves, that there's this amazing thing about winning together. And I think this community, the Hex and Pulse community, totally gets this, because this is what Richard Hart baked into the process is, hold on a second, what if we all won? What would it look like if we all won? And to me, that's a big idea that's embodied in, the blockchain, decentralization. And so LivFul is putting together these systems, embracing this. It's almost like the blockchain came at a perfect time for LivFul. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. I think we're figuring out how what that looks like.
Yeah.
Right. And but I think I mentioned before that there's a lot of amazing people who recognize what you just described and are working to harness that power to create the systems that connect people. And from my perspective, it's all about creating systems that are trustworthy. And that's why, to me, at the core, the blockchain is so incredible, because it takes that capacity to validate something and just takes it out of the hands of people.
Yeah.
And really, people are the problem in this equation, and me included, right? It's like, so that's the power of that. But you still have to have the systems that get created that harness that power, and have the vision to let them free and let them loose. And that is what we're trying to do within LivFul. And in our particular context, when you talk about building trust and tying resourcing to measurable impact, well, that doesn't exist, right? The ability to measure something and believe that it happened, that justifies the investment capital, or then, your own personal influence capital, or whatever it is. Like, those systems are being built right now.
Yeah.
They just, and we're seeing it happen. Like, and we within LivFul realize, to do the things we want to do, those systems have to get integrated into, our platform and who we want to be. And so it's certainly not fully baked. It's like at the kind of Wild West beginning stages, but it's incredible to even be having the conversation, where without the technologies, the digital platform, the mobile ubiquity around the world, like, you wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what's insane. And that's what we've seen in our own, last 25 years of living. It's like,
Yeah.
insane what's happened, and it's enabling these things to be. I mean, everybody understands it. They're going to be watching this video all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
As soon as it's available, you push a button and boom, it's available. Yeah. And, all those things. So all of that is being built, and that is going to be transformative. And you're going to see conflict between the current systems of the world and this emerging system because of this power shift.
Well, and you know what's neat about it too, the fourth turning book talked about the crisis era, and that, Gen Xers like us are part of this nomad group that is helping transition or bridge over and move people into this new, abundance kind of world. And of course, millennials are really the ones that are going to get to enjoy it and be the ones who really make it thrive. But we are the change agents. And one of the things I wanted to really point out, because there's practical applications of what you're talking about. I've caught this vision from you over the years. And one of the things that gets me so excited, and part of the reason that I even, challenged people with the Compassion Cartel, is because I see that without the resourcing, without the heart for purpose, without the heart for people who don't have the advantage, who have been disproportionately kind of left out because they didn't have the money, they need advocates. And, it's one thing to care about them, and it's another thing to have a working system that actually creates change. And when you talk about measurability or verification, if you think about it, we see this on there are a number of big investment firms that are looking at, we need to measure, you look on the environmental side with carbon credits, for example. How do we know that it actually is verifiable? And with the blockchain and with the idea of having things be transparent, which removes middlemen, which a lot of people have been gatekeepers, and as you said, the toll takers, if you will, to get a piece of the action. This is a really big idea from LivFul, this idea of measuring impact in a way that, at some point in the future, potentially could be tradable. But I see that there's a lot of people that sit on significant money who say, I have a responsibility to shareholders. I have a responsibility to people who have invested, but they are willing to sacrifice, ridiculous gains for impact. But I got to know that it actually happened. And to me, it's hard to get apples to apples in impact. How do you guys approach that? And what is the thinking around that? Because I know that it's not fully baked, but I know that if you can accomplish that, this is potentially one of the biggest catalytic impacts for moving resources in and actually advocating for people who have been really overlooked.
Yeah. If you think about the past 15 years, it's been pioneered by people, with their own resources going, I'm just in, like, I'm going to be a part of this movement. And that's good. And like I said, that's resulted in starting to be approaching, billions of dollars, but the investable capital of the world is, in the trillions, and it's hyper controlled, and it's not deployed into stuff like this, right? But because people are changing and people are saying, this is not acceptable, like, we've got to figure this out. The big money movers are recognizing, just for their own capacity to stay in the control seat, like, we got to answer this, right? And environmental movement has really driven that. So whatever you think about that, like, personally or politically, like, it's a massive driver in the finance world for behavior, right? And so moving from, like, me convincing you to use your resources to invest in me, to institutional kind of deployment of capital into cause and into purpose-driven things, is a whole other level of complexity, right? Because it's now about, how do you know that purpose is being carried out? How do you know? It's not enough for me to just trust Matt or trust Michael, right? So the massive thing that's got to happen is this verification and validation and measurement thing. So we've started just simply, looking at our programs and saying, okay, we said we were doing this with our first product to improve, create jobs or improve, days of protection with one of our products. And so we're just starting to try to measure that and report that and put that as a part of what we report to investors and stakeholders who care about that. That's very analog, that's like emailing someone and saying, tell me the numbers for the day. That's rudimentary for where it needs to get. And the people that are really sophisticated in this area are building those blockchain driven systems where, you use your mobile phone, you have the criteria you're measured against, and you have capacity to sort of on the site measure something and put it into this, the system that puts it onto the blockchain. Like, so we're more like at the front end of saying, here's what it needs to do. Here's what the systems need to do. How do we do it? But others are actually the developers of what's happening. And so we're working with one particular developer to try to scope that. But, health is lagging kind of the energy and environmental. So they're really driving, this development because that's where the market, that's where people have really been loud in saying, this has got to change. We need to understand what's happening. And so we're kind of getting the benefit of that as we think about how do we do that. But at the core, it's about having a goal of what your purpose is producing and then measuring that somehow. And absent the tools that are emerging, it would be very difficult to do. So we're at this beginning phase, I think, of seeing what that kind of transparency and that kind of accountability can unlock from a resource perspective.
Yep, totally. So let's talk about the future impact of a fully functioning LivFul, right? So you've been doing this for years. You've made progress. You have products. You're building this platform. It's built on trust. There's obviously a number of incredibly high capacity people on your team. You continue to grow. What's the future look like? I know your mission is to unlock generosity to heal the world, right? That is a big idea. What's the future state look like when these systems are built and this is functioning the way you envision it?
Yeah, well, we spent a lot of time thinking about this and what does it look like? And I think that, probably painting a picture is the easiest way to describe that, like of a success story that, then we would say we hope is happening hundreds or thousands of times around the world. But our first product is an insect repellent that's long lasting, nice to use, and was designed for the context of West Africa, where you're at risk all the time from malaria, most deadly forms of malaria, and also bugs in general are just a massive nuisance to living because it's just prolific, the bugs, and certainly the mosquitoes. And so there's straight ways to do this. Take a barrel, sell it to a distributor, they package, put it in a store. That's the traditional way to do it. And we do that. We want to do that, but it's a very expensive way to do that because there's so many markups that occur in the retail chain that if we only did that, you would have a very limited impact. You might make money, but you would not have impact. So alongside that, we're working with social entrepreneurs who are taking a different route to market and are really reaching their community around them as a small business and a small employer. That takes a different approach to packaging, shipping, manufacturing than just working with a pharmacy type company. Well, so success is scaling that.
Yeah.
Success is thousands and thousands of people creating a business for their community and becoming important within their community as a provider of jobs and better health. And wrapped in malaria it's not just, oh, I got malaria. Like in a less resource population, getting malaria can mean a tumble into extreme poverty. So there are these pushes into poverty that you're trying to eliminate structurally. So we're already seeing kind of the opportunities to scale that because there are informal networks already in place that the traditional pharmaceutical company is not even aware of or cares about, but are saying, this is what we need. And so, for example, in one country in Africa, we're working with a large kind of informal network of pastors that, it's not like you imagine a church in the United States where you like have a job and you're paid a salary. It's like, no, they're the pastors for a little small community. They don't get paid and they have to earn a living. And the church network is saying, we need something that they can provide in their community that's valuable, that they can make a living with, but is consistent with the mission of the group, right? To serve and love and help. So we're talking about, well, how do you move from a small social entrepreneur thing to a network, approach?
Yeah.
And it's not like, I don't have a problem with multi-level marketing, but some of those principles apply, but it's a different way of thinking because it's not just a product moving through a network, but also the influence and the thinking and the drawing back of insight, of value into that community. And how do we, come alongside that and continue to add to that? So you look out at success and it's these thriving, feedback loops of interaction and impact occurring and disease being prevented and jobs being created. And then the next innovation being drawn out of that network, right? And that need base, so that it creates this sort of ever, we look at it as an infinity loop. It's like feeding on itself and growing because it's self-fueling, and sustainable. So
that's a huge concept, right? And the fact that you're willing to go through the effort and work to build the systems that do that. What really strikes me when you share that is this concept of it's better to give or to help a man learn to fish than to give him a fish. And it seems like, taking the time to teach someone or to provide something that creates these impact outcomes like, oh, wow, I have a sustainable business. I actually help my community. We reduce disease, which the government loves because GDP is directly tied to the production of people. And so this idea of you're addressing the issue at its root cause and core, you're maintaining the dignity of people. And, that to me, you got an uphill battle to fight, but I feel like the wind is changing, right? That there is this opportunity where people are seeing, you know what, I'll sacrifice some of these profits of extraction for the purpose and the impact. And if you can certify that actually happens and it doesn't just get caught up with somebody's uncle who gets a cut of the money, that's why I don't like multi-level marketing. It's, if anything, it's like more middlemen versus less. And so this idea that, could we use the blockchain? Could we use this new generation of people that have access to the capital to be able to scale this? And that, what I hear you saying is that's the platform. It's really, once that's up and running and that pump is primed and it continues to infinitely rotate, if you will, that you can plug things into it. When it comes to innovation and things, give me some thoughts on that, because that is a big idea.
Well, and what I think following on what you just said, it's important to note, part of the critical need is measuring impact, right? And being able to create that trust loop.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of structural difficulties to doing business internationally, crossing borders with currency. That's only getting worse and worse, right? And we're going to see even more clampdown on that. So from our perspective, measuring and reporting and transparentness, I think that's a word, the transparent nature of this is critical. But then the tools that potentially, the PulseChain literally provides of a very cost-effective way to transfer, the tokens and things built on it. Now you're starting to also overcome some of the structural financial challenges of doing this kind of thing. So at the end of the day, our mission is to sell products to people in a way that improves their life, right? Yeah. But to do that, it requires this system building because the systems are broken, as we said. So to me, like the innovative person, they're there, they're making, they're creating. And so we're just trying to be a part of a systems integrator role where we see what's happening on the blockchain. We see what's happening with advances in, finance driven by cryptocurrency values and transferability and all that stuff, tying that to other forms of digital tools and recognizing that connecting that to products that are created to serve and love people can work. And the more you can sort of demonstrate that, the more people who are creators and innovators are like, I want to be a part of that. Yeah. I mean, back to our talk of who are the researchers in the, universities of the world? They're 22 to 28?
Yep.
And often are not from the United States, even if they're working in the United States or in, London or in Dubai. Where are they from? All over the world. Yeah. So they're naturally called into whatever they're doing because they've seen in their context the problems and they have a desire to serve them. But then they get sucked into the engine that is the health innovation engine, which pulls it all towards the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got a whole population of innovators who are primed, right? They're in it. They're in it for wanting to change and serve and having experienced problems often.
Well, and look at that conversation, I had with Hogan. I mean, Hogan's like this perfect picture.
Yeah, Hogan is the example.
Yeah, right? He's so great. It's like he knows what it's like. He knows the context of it. He's super smart, educated, all of that stuff, and wants to change. I mean, it's such a neat concept. And I think you're absolutely right. It's almost like, when you have someone that is talented, right? And let's say it's a younger person, and they may not have a lot of self-confidence, and someone that's older who's been there comes up to them and says, hey, you know what? I really think you can do it. And it's like rocket fuel in their veins, right? Wow, you really believe in me and you think you can do it. A big part of this is to enable that. And I think about all the people that are out there, to your point of working in these universities. I mean, if you were to poll all of these young people that are working, they'd say, yeah, I'm doing this because I want to make a difference. And that's different. That's different than the way that it used to be. It used to be more of just a way in which we could extract value. And I think that combination, if you are successful in building this platform and ecosystem and structure of trust, I just imagine how freeing that is for somebody who says, my calling and giftedness is to innovate, right? I even look at Richard Hart. Richard Hart he talks about this, biotech incubator, right? This desire that he has. He wants to extend life, right? Which is health. And I look at his vision for all of that stuff as saying, well, I know that his goal, he doesn't need money. He actually wants to lift up the kind of health-related innovations that actually make life better for people regardless of their income. And that's what's so cool. I mean, it's just a full circle moment for me is I hear that story, then I hear your story and I go, you know what, can we come together as people who are going to find ourselves in a position of abundance with the PulseChain and with the blockchain and all of this newfound wealth? And can we, join together to actually change the system and make it more equitable for people and to make it, not only impactful, but also sustainable. And I think that that's the thing that's been missing in all of this is that it needs to operate on its own. It doesn't need to be just handed out to you. So,
I would say health. So from LivFul's perspective, health is the great connector.
Yeah.
Because no matter your religious beliefs, no matter your political beliefs, your ethnicity, if my kid is sick and you can help me with my kid, then you're my friend.
That's right.
We are connected. And that's just the way it works. And so building, this is why it's so awful the way our system works, because we're taking that thing, which is this great connector and leveler where we should be serving and helping each other, and we turn it into this system of essentially extracting, your heart and life in order to deliver something that can help you.
Yeah.
So we are very passionate about this is a connector of people, right? That transcends borders, languages, socioeconomic status. This is what we were made to do for each other. And you need that. That's true when you're enabled with resources, and that's why I get so excited about crypto. It's like you're creating a whole group of people that isn't JP Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just is what's happened.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. It's different, than the past.
I listened to a stream last night and I was watching these guys and they said, you know what, if Pulse were to hit $1, which is an unbelievable price point of PLS, they said 56 wallet holders would have over $1 trillion. Over $1 trillion, 56 people. Now, will Pulse hit $1? I don't know. But the point is, that's the kind of shift of resources we're talking about. And so I want to say to people who have felt very weak and not able to make a difference, there's a shift happening where people just in our community, and that's just a piece of crypto, that care about these things could really, truly make a systematic shift. And, if there's anything, you look at as a symptom of the problem is, Occupy Wall Street was a great example of saying this is not right. People, whether you agree with that or not, it's a symptom of the problem. And I just really admire what you're doing because you're stepping out saying we're called to actually build the systems that facilitate this kind of change and systematic change that bring dignity and preserve, contextual, support. To me, it's brilliant. It's also, I recognize, extremely difficult.
It is. But what's so cool is that it's easy to sort of paint a big us versus them.
Yeah.
But them is people. Right. And people can change systems. So it's not impossible that it can't change. It's just that it takes people causing change. Well, how does that happen? It happens through leadership. It has to demonstrating that things can be different and that it can work and that it can be profitable and it can be profitable beyond financial terms, socially, in human capital terms. So we're the vanguard of that. We're like the spear point in what we're doing, but also in this community. And it's crazy what's possible. It's crazy.
Well, I super, so much appreciate your time. One of the things I just feel led to say, and I feel like somebody is going to watch this video and go, I need to talk to Michael because you just like read my mail. You know exactly what I've been dealing with or the struggles we've had. And I need to make that connection. And I really feel like, and that's my hope for you. I mean, obviously us being in a relationship for as long as we have and, seeing all the things that you in your journey, it feels like this is the time. And so I would say if anybody is interested in this concept and interested in knowing more, I assume you're open to them reaching out to you, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll put your email underneath your photo here, your video, and so people can contact. But for those of you who are in the Compassion Cartel, for those of you who are thinking in terms of how do we make a difference, that's why the Compassion Cartel is not a blockchain project. It's a community project. It's because everybody has a heart for different things. And we are not to determine someone's calling. That's something that happens inside of you. And I believe that the connections will be made that need to be made at the appropriate times. But I feel like just what you said, Michael, about leadership. Here you are leading out as a CEO of a company, trying to advocate for a systemic change. And when I look at the Compassion Cartel, for example, what I'm trying to lead out in is this idea of how do we unlock and basically give people permission to say, you can do great things and you can do well for yourself. It's not one or the other. You don't have to have this vow of poverty to be effective. You can take the engines of the systems and you can invest in them in a way that actually supports that kind of change. But Michael, you're doing God's work, man. I'll tell you, it is. It's so exciting to see all of these things coming together that, in many cases, are out of your control. Right? The blockchain, the generational shift, all of these things. It almost feels like this is the time where we might actually have a shot to change things for the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're giving it our shot.
That's right. Well, we're going to try our best and pray a lot. Michael, thank you so much for sharing about the work that you do. I've been looking forward to doing this interview with you for a long time. Anything you want to share with the community, especially the fact that you're a PulseChan and they can, you're in and you're going to be a part of the whole deal. Anything you want to share?
I would just say, I as I said, I'm fairly new, so I'm observing and watching the spirit and this incredible movement and expectation. And so it's exciting to see, I couldn't have seen this 10 years ago, this tool that may be part of unlocking what we've been working for years on. And that's amazing and great to be a part of. And, I sit as excited as anybody saying what's going to happen and glad to be a part of this community.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that we got somebody advocating who's strategic like you. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to, updates and such. And if you're interested in talking to Michael, reach out to him in email, connect with him. I think that there are some people who probably have some relationships that, would be awesome to connect you with as well. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.